Good morning and welcome back to Before the Bell with Roman and Zain. Today is Friday, September 5th, and another day of whirlwind of news, isn't it, Zain? As we have some headlines that are shaping up to be huge market movers.
Very much a whirlwind of news. You said it right there, Roman. Yesterday was just a preview of the main event. We're getting a deeper look at the ripple effects from yesterday's geopolitical shifts, and today is all about the big ticket economic data, the jobs report that everyone has been waiting for.
Yeah, Zane, today we'll be diving into how all these stories are connected, as always, from a softening labor market to an ongoing geopolitical theater in Europe and Asia. But first, let's get into a rundown of the today's top headlines.
The U.S. stock market built on yesterday's momentum, with the S&P 500, Dow Jones Industrial Average, and Nasdaq all posting gains. This morning, futures are pointing higher, suggesting that the rally is continuing. The optimism is clearly tied to the new data we got yesterday, showing a softer labor market, which has fueled investors' hopes for a Federal Reserve interest rate cut later this month.
Mhm. That's a great point there, Zane. As yesterday's weaker than expected private hiring and increase in unemployment applications were seen as a green light for the Fed to act, as the market is viewing this as a win-win, as a slightly cooling economy that won't tip into recession, but it's also soft enough to get the central bank to ease up on the monetary policy. As this morning's pre-market activity shows that investors are really ready to extend that bet.
And the bond market is also reflecting this, Roman. We're seeing treasury yields hold steady or pull back a bit as the possibility of a rate cut increases. This is a crucial sign for the broader economy, as lower borrowing costs would be a significant boost for everything from mortgages to corporate loans.
Yeah, Zane, and it's fascinating as the market is clearly weighing in between the two narratives here. And on the other hand, the prosperity of a rate cut is also lifting stocks. But on the other hand, the San Francisco Fed report reminded everyone that inflation is still above the 2% target, as they're also watching for any potential inflammatory pressures from tariffs, which would furthermore complicate the Fed's decision making. So, this is a classic balancing act that the market has to continuously navigate. And to move on, for our today's bell ringer, we've got two major headlines that really are setting the tone. As first, let's as always talk geopolitics, as we touched up on this a little bit yesterday. But China and North Korea are furthermore deepening their ties, as the Chinese President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong Un were able to meet in Beijing on the silence of a parade commemorating the 80th anniversary of the World War II.
And this wasn't just a ceremonial meeting, Roman. With Russia's Vladimir Putin also in attendance, this convergence of leaders has sparked widespread speculation about a new anti Western bloc. While some analysts are downplaying the possibility of a formal three-way alliance, the visual is a powerful statement. It signals a growing network of nations looking to forge an alternative to the US led global order, and that has serial implications for international security and trade.
Yeah, Zane. And our second bell ringer takes us back to home, to Washington, D.C., as U.S. Representatives Scott Peters and Jason Crow have now introduced a bill called the National Security Climate Intelligence Act. And this legislation would require the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to evaluate the economic and national securities of climate change.
This is a significant move, Roman, especially since the original intelligence assessment on this topic was rescinded earlier in the year. The original report highlighted how climate change will increasingly exacerbate risks to U.S. interests through geopolitical tensions, competition for resources, and instability in developing nations. Reintroducing this bill shows that there's a strong push in Congress to officially recognize climate change as a national security threat and incorporate it into foreign policy and military planning. It could lead to a whole new layer of analysis for investors to consider when evaluating international markets and long term risk.
Yeah, Zane. And now let's get into the details of these stories because, as we always say, everything is always connected. And that the meeting in Beijing was not an isolated event, as it comes at a time of rising tensions between multiple countries and the shift in power across the whole globe, as we've seen ongoing developments in the Middle East as well, as Israel has conducted airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, while its operation in Gaza could continue for up to a year or more.
And amid that conflict, the Palestinian group Hamas has agreed to the formation of a new independent administration of technocrats to run the Gaza Strip. The proposal is currently awaiting a response from Israel. These are very complex moving parts, and each development, from a new airstrike to a potential new administration, adds to the uncertainty and risk premium for energy markets and companies with operations in the region.
Yeah, Zain, and now shifting back to the US, coming back home, we have more on the foreign policy front as the president has indicated a willingness to send more US troops to Poland if so requested, and has been able to suggest that his administration is working on further economic penalties for Russia, as he's also suggested that his administration is working on further economic penalties on Russia. This comes just as Russia's Vladimir Putin was meeting with China's Xi Jinping, as the messaging is clear as day. The U.S. is signaling its commitment to the NATO allies and is willing to put increasing pressure on Russia, as this will undoubtedly increase the trade tensions between the two countries and could lead to more sanctions and export controls.
And the market is certainly watching this. Any new sanctions against Russia could affect commodity prices, particularly energy, and the prospect of more U.S. troops in Europe, while a show of support for allies could also be interpreted as a sign of rising geopolitical risk. It makes every investor reevaluate their exposure to European assets and think about the potential for wider conflict. This is a case of you have to tread very carefully. There's not really a perfect scenario or a perfect decision to make, so you have to just weigh your options and pick what's best.
Yeah, Zane. And now we're just gonna give you a quick look at what's ahead between the two of us. So you know what we'll personally be keeping an eye on for the rest of the day. So Zane, what's on your radar?
Well, Roman, today is the big one, the U.S. employment report. We got a taste of it yesterday with the private hiring data, but the full non-farm payrolls and unemployment numbers for August are coming out this morning. This will either confirm the weakness we've seen or throw a curveball at the market's expectation for a rate cut. It's the most significant market moving event on the calendar.
Yeah, Zane, and I'll personally be watching for any more analysis on the Hamas proposal for a new administration within Gaza, as the Israeli response will be a key signal on how the conflict may or may not be played out within the next few incoming months.
And now let's go beyond the headlines, Roman. Today, we're seeing how the headlines we read are interconnected and influencing global strategy. The meeting between China, North Korea, and Russia isn't just a photo opportunity. It's a strategic effort to forge a counterbalance to US and European influence. This shift means that companies and businesses will have to increasingly navigate a world with two competing spheres of influence, each with its own trade rules and geopolitical alliances. The ongoing conflict in the Middle East and the US commitment to Poland are direct examples of this global realignment in action.
Exactly, Zane. I totally agree with you. As the domestic push in the US to formally recognize climate change as a national security threat is another example of strategic recalibration, as it's a direct response to the global instability that we've been able to see ourselves, as everything from competition from water resources to mass migration within this country, as this bill would not only compel US foreign policies to consider these new risks, it would also affect everything where the US invests its aid and which country it partners with on the defense front, as it's a complete rethinking of what national security, even in the 21st century, means.
You said it exactly right. I couldn't agree with you more. The market isn't just reacting to numbers, it's digesting a complex mix of policy, legal, and social signals. Navigating this world requires understanding the interplay between a country's foreign policy and a company's bottom line. The past 24 hours have been a stark reminder that in an interconnected world, every major event, no matter where it happens, has the potential to influence a portfolio.
Yeah, Zane, I totally agree with you. But unfortunately, that's all the time that we do have for Before the Bell with Roman and Zane. So throughout this weekend. Keep an eye on how all these geopolitical and financial trends continue to develop. As always, keep up with the news. And as always, and I always have to say this, one of us, that is, nothing here is financial advice, and we're just sharing insights and analysis for informational purposes. Have a good weekend.
And a big thank you to everyone who's been following along. We really appreciate your engagement and your curiosity. Don't forget to connect with us on TikTok and Instagram at Before the Bell Roman Zain for quick clips, updates, and insights throughout the day. It really helps us to boost our engagement, boost our viewings. It brings us out there more, which we're trying to really help people out. Just understand the stock market, how it works. What news is coming out. Just keep everybody updated. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys on Monday.
Yeah.